Welcome to episode 3 of High Elevation. You're your host, Alex Feinberg, and my man, Jungle J. If I have any focaccia bread or skirt steak in my teeth, rest assured my lunch tasted better than yours, and that's why.
What's going on, Alex? What you got for lunch today?
Had a little bit of skirt steak. Had my man, Ethan Buck, Iron Will PT. If you follow him on Twitter, Instagram, over for lunch, Austin area dude. So we had some tacos yesterday outside, enjoyed the nice deck. And had a little bit of leftovers. So I figured, coming back from my neuromuscular massage from our wonderful magician, Barbara, who Jay introduced me to in Austin, had a quick turnaround time before we press record. So I just figured I'd heat up some leftovers and do well with that, which I did.
I think what could be a cool topic, Alex just asked me before the podcast, what do you want to talk about today? And I was like, I don't know. We'll see.
We do zero prep work, by the way. When you guys see the videos I put on Twitter, zero prep work, one take. Done.
Literally zero prep work. So I think a cool topic kind of made me think of it. We could talk about recovery today, because we're both, you've been a really high level athlete, right? You were a Division I athlete, you were a professional athlete. And now as we both get older, we still compete regularly, I guess. I'm competing in Ironman, you're training hard regularly. Yeah. So maybe we could talk a little bit about recovery. You mentioned, massage. There's so many different modalities of recovery that we both implement. It could be cool.
Yeah, I think so too. So maybe before we dive into the exact methods, I think it's probably good to do a little bit of a deep dive on why recovery is important and why it gets overlooked by so many people. The reason why it's important is you make all your gains outside of training, right? Mm-hmm. Training only breaks your body down. And so you build your body up when you eat, when you sleep, when you're outside the gym, right? Even if you're not doing any new age stuff, no infrared saunas, no ice baths, nothing, you will recover from eating and sleeping. Now, the challenge that a lot of people face in recovery is it's hard for many people to distinguish between recovering and being lazy. And oftentimes, the main catalyst that many people have, I've sat on the couch every day, watched Netflix for the last 3 months. It's visually apparent. I can see my gut in the mirror. What do I do now? I need to get my ass in gear, get my ass to the gym. And that's a correct decision at that point. And lo and behold, you get your ass to the gym 4 days a week, 3 days a week, 5 days a week, and you do it consistently for a few months. And whether you have monitored your diet or not, very likely you'll have seen results. And if you've monitored your diet, you've probably seen more than some results. And you've gone from being, maybe very overweight to slightly overweight, or slightly overweight to not overweight, but not, the way you want to look. And, this can take 3 months, this can take 3 years, depending on the individual and the state in which they are when they start. But the mindset that they have to learn in the initial phase is, my body's telling me no, but I need to push through it. Because everybody, when they're starting off, whether they're training for a triathlon, training for powerlifting, training just to be in general good shape, their body's going to reject the training even when they're perfectly healthy. And so the mindset shift that's required to kickstart your journey is very much a no pain, no gain mindset. And in the beginning, the more consistent you are in your training, the better you're going to be, right? The challenges that a lot of people face when they get to the intermediate or advanced level is they try to apply the same game plan that got them there to get to their next destination. And that's very frequently why people get stuck in life. It's because they're trying to apply a toolkit that has been useful in the past to solve a problem that no longer exists. And when you become more advanced or even older, as an athlete, your body requires more training, right? If you're new to deadlifting, you weigh 180 pounds and you're deadlifting 225 pounds, you can probably deadlift twice a week. And your body doesn't know how to recruit the muscles and the rest of your body in a way that will allow you to rep twice your body weight, three times your body weight. As you get stronger, you go from 225 to 315 working sets to 405 working sets, and maybe your weight's only gone up 10 pounds. So in the beginning of your journey, you're repping 1.2 times your body weight for your working sets, and 3 years in, maybe you're repping 2 times your body weight. Right. Well, that's going to place a lot more stress on your body. And just because you're able to do more work in the gym doesn't mean you're going to recover from a max effort session on the same timeline. Because if you're lifting twice as much, or if you're lifting 50% more, It's going to take longer for you to recover. And so a lot of people stay stagnant and they don't get better. In fact, they get injured and potentially regress due to these injuries because they're unwilling to reconsider that the problem that they're facing today is not the same problem as the problem they faced 3 years ago. And it's really, really hard for them to make that shift because they feel like if they take a week off or if they go light for a week, they're going to immediately regress to the state that they desperately wanted to avoid being in, which set them on their journey in the first place. And from what I've seen in my life, a lot of my peers who I played baseball with in college, the ones who think I'm on steroids, which is probably nearly all of them, what they don't realize is the reason why I've been able to continue to make progress through my 30s is I'm just getting like 1% better every 3 months. Like I'm not, you guys see, I put up lifting videos month after month, year after year, and it's like they're pretty similar. They're directionally going up, but very slowly. And the fact that they are continually going up quarter after quarter means at the end of 3 years, I'm actually like a different person than at the beginning of those 3 years. And I'm an athlete now. I visually appear to be an athlete that I never was at any point in my life, even in my 20s when I had a younger and in many ways healthier body. So that is, I think, the foundation for why recovery is important and why people get it so wrong. Prove me wrong, Jay.
I love that. You did an incredible job of laying the foundation there. And something you said at the end reminded me of something that I've been learning through Ironman and triathlon training is, it takes confidence to take an off day, right? You got to have confidence to take a rest day. Most guys aren't willing to take that rest day because they're afraid of not being prepared then. And so I think it's a fine line of understanding your body, being in tune with your body and knowing when you need to rest, because as you mentioned, rest is when you grow. Right? You're not growing in the gym. You're breaking yourself down, of course, which is what we want. But when you rest is where the real growth is going to come from. And so a little bit about me, I've been competing at some level my entire life. Throughout school, I was always an athlete in many different sports. In high school, it was track for me. And then I got into weightlifting at 16 years old, became obsessed with it really quickly, lifted more so for physique purposes for many years early on. I wanted to be a cover model. As Zach says, I wanted to be a show pony, And so early on, I wasn't necessarily breaking my body down as much. It didn't require as much recovery just for physique training early on. I was 18, 19 years old. The body recovers quicker when you're younger too. As you mentioned, you start to get to late 20s. Now you're mid 30s and it requires more focus for recovery. But once I started to get into powerlifting early 20s, when I was like, okay, like I got to start to take care of my body a little bit more. Right. And so went through, and I'll kind of give my overview and I'll kind of rewind, but powerlifting for many years at a high level, was competing. And my goal was eventually to be a 700-pound deadlifter and was constantly moving big weight, and then transitioned from powerlifting into now Ironman. And I'm competing in triathlon now. So a little bit about kind of my journey and how I got to where I'm at. But really for me, the foundation of recovery is rest, of course, number one, right? Time outside of training, which is crucial. With food, it starts with protein. Like most people are under eating protein, right? Protein is the building blocks of every cellular process pretty much in our body. And so eating enough protein, adequate protein to be able to actually build your muscle back up is incredibly important. And it's an area that I think a lot of people are lacking, and for most people, like 3/4 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is pretty reasonable. And obviously there's time and space for sometimes more than that, but 3/4 to 1 gram is probably a good kind of focal point with nutrition. And so,
and if you're not tracking how you're eating, you're just kind of eating like the standard American. The average American, I think, eats about 3,500 calories a day, which is more than I've been averaging the last several months.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's what I read. I don't really know how you know that, because it's not like they're, Amazon might know that better than anybody else. But I don't know how you would know that. But that's what the estimates say. And I mean, if you're drinking a lot of soda, eating a lot of chips, perhaps that's possible. Well, I would estimate that the average American, whether they're consuming 3,500 calories a day or 2,500 calories a day, however many calories a day they're consuming, I would guess if you're just kind of eating regular American food, you wake up, maybe eat some cereal, maybe eat some oatmeal or something in the morning. You go for lunch, maybe you go to Taco Bell for lunch, maybe you go to In-N-Out for lunch, and then for dinner, you're doing another DoorDash type meal, or maybe you're making something at home, but it's like a standard recipe. That American's probably going to be having 60 to 70 grams of protein per day. I would say on average. And well, that's going to lead them to eating a lot of food that isn't protein, which is very likely food that they don't need. And so they might end up eating more calorically by eating insufficient protein. And then once people start lifting, they think, oh, okay, I'll take protein shakes. It's like, okay, great. You could take a protein shake. A protein shake has like 20 grams of protein. Maybe it's a big shake with a lot of protein, like 40 grams or something like that. But if you just say, okay, I'm going to eat the way I'm going to eat, and I'm going to have a protein shake, well, then you're going from 60 to 70 grams to 80 to 90 grams a day. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, that's still most likely not enough. And when you are recovering from training, you have to think of your body like it moves on a curve, right? So every time you're training, you get worse, right? If you do heavy deadlifts and you try to do deadlifts the next day, you won't be able to do as heavy, the Tuesday after a Monday. And so you need to recover so you can get better than where you were that Monday. And if you don't recover long enough, you're just going to get to where you were on Monday, or maybe you won't even get back to where you were on Monday. And your production is going to diminish, and you're not going to have any stimulus that gives your body the signal that says grow. I want to grow, because you're not lifting progressively heavier weights. You're not able to train at a progressively higher intensity. So there's no signal to your body that says I need to add muscle and cut fat.
Yeah, and interesting point. Most people are probably eating predominantly fat and carbs, right? If they're not really paying attention, it's mostly fat and carbs. And so point being, most people are incredibly protein deficient. And so protein is going to be, for me, like huge focus point for recovery. So we got hydration, we've got protein, and just enough calories, right? Like, man, early on when I was training, I wasn't taking in nearly enough calories. And what happened was eventually I got overtrained, right? Because I wasn't recovering enough. So then overtraining comes into play. So then my hormones got wrecked. So then I'm not sleeping as well. So now my sleep's affecting, my hormones, and it becomes this vicious cycle that started with not eating enough food.
Yeah. And that's one of the big digs that I have on protein shakes too. People always ask me, do you have protein shakes? I started to reincorporate them for a very specific reason. But, I had been connected with the people behind the Centenarius brand, I believe it's called, which is a very good brand. It's a very high quality whey protein that a lot of people on Twitter are posting about. And, it tastes great. And I tried it for a week or two, and I thought it tasted great. But after a couple of weeks of taking it, I go into the gym and the weight just feels way heavier than it felt 2 weeks prior. I'm like, what? Like, this is not what 340 pounds is supposed to feel like. It felt lighter 2 weeks ago. And as you get to be more advanced in your training, you'll notice the difference between 340 and 325 pounds, right? And you'll notice, like, this is how hard it should feel. No, it should not feel this hard. And so I'm thinking, like, okay, all my lifts seem like 3-4% harder, and nothing's changed. I'm getting enough sleep. I've maintained my existing rest cycle. Oh, it's because I've convinced myself that when I'm hungry late at night and I have a protein shake instead of steak, that's sufficient. And it knocks out my hunger. I go to bed, and then I wake up the next day, and yeah, I might have gotten 80 calories from the 20 grams of protein that I ate in the protein shake. But if I had consumed 4 ounces of beef in lieu of that protein, probably getting closer to 200 calories, right? So every protein shake I have might fill me up, might convince me that I'm full, but it's actually shorting me by like 100 calories that my body needs to recover. So yeah, obviously when I go in the gym after doing this for a week or two, the weight feels heavier. And if the weight feels heavier, eventually you can't lift as heavy, which means you're going to lose lean muscle mass, which means your metabolism is going to slow down, and you're not going to have the progress or the gains that you want.
For me with protein shakes, number one, protein shakes aren't for, especially a lot of the young guys here listening, if you're new to lifting. And so number one, protein shakes aren't special necessarily, but for me, they help me out a lot because I make mega smoothies, right? So when I make a protein smoothie, which I usually do once every day or so, sometimes 3-4 times a week, but I make a mega smoothie where it's got 2 scoops of protein, so about 40-45 grams of grass-fed, high-quality whey protein. But I also add a ton of frozen fruit, mangoes, mixed berries, banana. I add honey. I add olive oil usually, and I'll add some like mushroom mixes, different blends of mushrooms. And so
that's effectively a meal, right?
Exactly.
Where,
And so
you're having hundreds or thousands of calories in that meal, and that meal would be protein deficient if you didn't supplement it with a couple scoops of protein.
And it still is somewhat protein deficient, right? I could probably do 3 scoops of protein to get myself where I would usually be if I was having a normal meal. But my goal is to have that between meals, right? Because I'm burning so many calories right now in my peak Ironman training leading up to a race. Like we're over doing it a lot right now. And that's just kind of how it goes going into a full Ironman. And so I need as many calories as I can get, and of course protein. And so like, I'm not replacing a meal with it necessarily. It's actually in addition to my normal 3 big meals that I have, and also addition to the bone broth that I have in the morning.
Right. And, I mentioned that I do take protein shakes now for a very specific purpose. I think bone broth would also match that purpose, where I place a lot of emphasis on my conditioning output. One of the reasons why I'm able to stay lean year round is I approach conditioning like a lift. I track my progress. I know how well I'm doing relative to my PR. And I know if I'm generally trending upwards or downwards. I have found that I can condition better on a mostly empty stomach, but I don't want to condition on fully empty stomach because that could lead to catabolic responses and losing lean muscle mass. And so the negotiated deal that I made with myself is I don't have to eat breakfast before I do my conditioning, but I do need to, throw a little bit of protein in my coffee. And so I have a little bit of food in me before I go condition, and then I eat and I lift.
I like that. That's exactly what I've been doing recently, as well as my first workout's usually 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. every day. So if I have a 6:30 a.m. training session, I'm going to get up at 5. I'm going to get up. I'm going to get bone broth going right away. So I'll have some water, and then I'll have a cup of bone broth. So let's say 15 to 20 grams of protein for a big homemade cup of bone broth, in addition to some fat. So I'll throw some beef tallow in there. So now I'm getting some quality fat in my body. I'm getting some quality protein in my body. And then also too, for my conditioning training, I'll usually throw in like a piece of some high quality, no seed oil sourdough bread with some butter on it, so a little bit more fat, and then also some local jam on top of it too. So like by the time I enter my first training session, my body's already got some hydration. I got some salt. We haven't talked about salt, but salt intake's incredibly important. A lot of people are lacking there. So I'll throw some salt in my body as well. And then I'm primed up and ready to go for that first session.
Yeah, absolutely. And, before we get into some of the specifics, I think one analogy that I tell the people that I coach is that, it's not necessarily about training more. It's about like training the right amount, right? If you're training too much, you're not going to get good results. If you're training not enough, you're not going to get good results. You have to train the right amount. And that amount can change week over week, depending on your stress levels, your sleep, your hydration, all that. The other thing I say is that discipline, because discipline is very important. Discipline is actually one of the reasons why people overtrain, is because they're afraid to lose discipline. But they're misdefining discipline. Discipline, in my view, is doing the thing that you know is correct, even when it makes you feel uncomfortable. And so for most people, that's getting their ass in the gym. But for some people, that's keeping their ass out of the gym. And you know which one of those people you are.
I'm definitely the one that has to limit myself.
Yeah.
Which person are you?
That too, right? Most elite performers, self-made performers, are the people who have to limit themselves. And so the reason why, you guys say, and I say that I'm like the laziest, fit jack bro on Twitter is not because I'm lazy, which I am at times. It's literally because my body responds best to a program that other people might look at and say, that can't be all he's doing. It's like, well, no, that's all I'm doing. And that is why I'm getting the results I'm getting. I'm not getting results, I'm not getting results despite being lazy. I'm getting results because I am lazy in some regard. Because if I wouldn't force myself to be lazy, I would overtrain and I would be at injury risk, and I wouldn't have ever achieved the gains that I've achieved to date.
Sure. I see that all the time in Ironman training, right? Is people want to get to where they want to go, their destination, quicker, and you can't really necessarily accelerate the process beyond a certain extent, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, you can focus on recovery. The more you recover, the quicker you recover, the more you can train. But a lot of people, they want to skip steps, right? And what happens ultimately, as you just mentioned, those are the people that are always injured, right? Mm-hmm. They're always injured because you can't skip steps. And that's what I love about the sport so much is, man, I have these massive audacious goals, and I know you have big goals with your body too. And it just takes time. Like there's no other way around it. It's going to take 3, 5, 10 years plus to ultimately get to where I want to go. And so to rewind a little bit though, on the recovery side, I like where we were going with that. So obviously food, water, Those are foundation pieces of sleep, of course. Like that's another foundational piece is sleeping. Like if you're not sleeping, then you're not going to recover. Like sleep is where a lot of our recovery happens, and a ton of different takes there. Alex's sleep schedule is completely different than my sleep schedule. We can get into that in a different podcast. But where we started this was with the massage stuff, right? So there's all these other modalities of recovery that come in and play a big role. And so really, honestly, up until I moved to Austin and until really this year when I got heavy into Ironman training, even back in my days of like really pushing in strongman and powerlifting, I never really focused on mobility. I never really got massage work done. And so I know two things that you're really big on that I'm now really big on too are mobility work on your own, right? And then also work with professionals like Barbara, the masseuse that we both work. So maybe we can get into that a little bit.
Yeah. I kind of talked through my journey in my 20s where, in my 20s, my goal with fitness was I want to be in good enough shape to date the women I want to date and get jobs and get paid more money than the next guy who wasn't in shape, because I realized that being good looking and being well spoken are probably two of the best advantages you can give yourself in your career. And so I put the work in, but I didn't want to become obsessed with it, right? I wanted to be in the gym, in for an hour, out, done, on with my day. And I see all these older people doing mobility work. I'm like, I'm not going to be one of those guys, right? Yeah, I don't need to do that. My body doesn't hurt. I'm good. I kept lifting and I never had any serious injuries. I always told myself, well, if I ever have a serious injury, I'll reassess what I'm doing, because clearly, if I'm doing something that's led to a serious injury, I shouldn't be doing that. Well, by my late 20s, my left shoulder, which I had surgery on in college after dislocating it a couple times, started to bother me when I would do barbell bench. It would never bother me on dumbbell bench, whether flat or incline, but it started to bother me on my barbell bench. And I never thought much of it because I sort of thought, well, I didn't do anything to injure it. It's been fine from 20 years old to 28 years old. I had no injury to it since then. So, this is something that'll probably go away. And my late 20s, sometimes it would go away. Sometimes I go, bench, no shoulder pain, fine. All right, maybe it's gone. I have that mindset of a competing athlete where if it's like not going to keep me out of competition, I'm going to compete. By the time I got to 32, I adjusted the training program that I was doing for a little bit, which ended up putting a lot more stress on my shoulder. And I was putting CBD rubs on it, THC rubs on it, all sorts of medicinal remedies to calm the inflammation. Because in my mind, I'm like, well, I just need like a corticosteroid shot to break whatever stuff's up in there and I'll be fine. Well, I finally get an MRI at 32 and a half, and they're like, oh, you have old man shoulder. You have a large bone spur and arthritis. If you were in your 60s, we'd tell you to get a shoulder replacement right now. And I'm thinking in my head, like, this is crazy. I was incline bench pressing 105 pounds 48 hours ago. That's wrong. But clearly, like, I had very, very limited shoulder mobility, and it progressively got worse month after month. Like it was like this, and then it just kind of fell off a cliff. And I thought, shit, like lifting is a pretty big part of my identity. And if I can't do it at the level that I've been accustomed to, what is that going to mean for my physique? What's that going to mean for my self-confidence, my ability to engage with the world, my ability to earn income without, becoming a corporate slave? And so, they suggested that I work on mobility. I finally found a good mobility specialist in San Francisco, got a full diagnosis that, sir, your mobility is horrendous. And got a bunch of great mobility exercises that I've been doing nearly every day since then. The good news is my shoulder is substantially better than it was 4 years ago. The bad news is because the body adjusts slowly, it's probably going to take me a couple more years to get it to where it's simply bad, right? So we started with horrendous 4 years ago. Probably 3 years ago, well, let's say we started with extremely horrifically horrendous 4 years ago. 3 years ago, it was probably horrendous. 2 years ago, it was probably very bad, very, very bad. I'd say that's a notch below horrendous. And now it's probably very bad, right? Very bad is probably, 2 or 3 notches above where it was 4 years ago. And it's never going to be good. Like, I have no illusions that it's ever going to be good. But if I can merely get it to be bad, well, if it's bad, then I can add weight to my push-ups. Maybe I can start reintroducing overhead press. I can get better range of motion in my lat movements. I can perform my lower body movements with more symmetry, taking some strain off of my spine. And so that's the goal. We want to stay in the gym for as long as possible. And that's not something that's top of mind when you're in your 20s and your body mostly feels decent every time you're training. But by the time you turn 30, it's like a magic thing happens when you turn 30. And you'll find this out, Jay. Like, your body doesn't feel the way it used to. I remember watching Joe Rogan when I was like maybe I was just about turning 30. He's talking about eating all these foods, getting inflammation. And I'm like, what the fuck is inflammation? Like, what are these people talking about? And then like literally a year or two later, it's like, oh yeah, I notice after I eat this restaurant pizza, my shoulder feels terrible. Oh, and I'm actually noticing that I get a runny nose after eating pizza from this place. And these are all inflammatory symptoms. And when I don't eat the food that my physical therapist tells me not to eat, my shoulder feels a lot more mobile. Okay, maybe I need to pay attention to that. And so, I kind of figured out fat loss very well in my 20s, but my 30s has been more of a process of how do we stay in the game for as long as possible? Because I enjoy training. You enjoy training. I enjoy lifting weights. I want to keep getting better at it. I can't keep getting better at it if I'm hurt. So, I put just as much focus on the mobility work that I do with my training. Just put out Mobility Mastery that shows all the mobility work that I do to stay relatively healthy and able to train at a high level still at 36 years old.
You spend more time doing mobility than anyone I've ever met. And it's incredibly inspiring because even when we went to Costa Rica together back in February, I wasn't on the game yet. I wasn't dialed in on my mobility yet. And so first off, before I share some things on that, I want to ask you a question. So if you had been doing mobility since your early 20s, could that issue have been avoided?
Almost certainly. And if not avoided, it would have just meant that there's less work that I have to do now. So the thing, I try to make body investments the same way I make financial investments, in that in finance, if you make a good investment in your 20s, it can be worth 10 times as much when you're 40, right? Because that's how investments work. You put in a little bit of money and it grows over time. The body works exactly the opposite way, where if you put no investment in, you may not see much of a decline until you see a pretty significant decline. And that decline can mean arthritic symptoms for some people. It can be nerve issues with some people, and it can be more serious things, cardiac issues, metabolic issues like diabetes, obesity. And so the thing is, the people who would benefit the most from mobility work don't realize it because they're too young to feel the pain. And so if I had spent 20 minutes a day in my 20s doing mobility work, I could probably get away with doing I do like an hour a day now. I could probably get away with doing half right now, 30 minutes a day now. But I did 0 minutes a day in my 20s. So I got to do an hour a day now.
So learn from Alex's mistakes. Young people out there listening, start your mobility now. So you're not like Alex spending tens of thousands of dollars a year trying to get your shoulder back and hours a day trying to get that sucker to bad. Yeah. Right. That's very, very admirable of you. I mean, I guess you have no option.
I guess, I probably recover from bad news better than most people, but like all I can do is the smartest thing I can do. Yeah. And so what's the smartest thing I can do? Well, I'm not going to do bench press anymore. Fortunately, I have good chest genetics. So people who look at me assume that I do a lot of heavy lifting. I just do push-ups now. I just do six sets of 15 push-ups weekly. And that's all I do. And I can engage my pecs doing that. And it's fine. That doesn't seem to bother my shoulder. But the main reason I do the shoulder mobility work is really to protect my spine. Because what you realize, especially as you get older and small injuries, compound into more complex injuries, is anytime you have movement limitations, something's going to compensate for immobility. And so even on a predominantly lower body lift, like a squat, right? If my left shoulder doesn't move as freely as my right shoulder, then I'm naturally not going to go down and come up perfectly aligned, because I'm going to go away from the point of resistance and towards the path of least resistance, right? And so even in my mind, if I'm not filming my lifts and I'm just doing, okay, this feels straight, look at it on camera, not straight. And so what happens if you continually move in an asymmetric fashion, you're going to put asymmetric load on your spine. When you put asymmetric load on your spine, you're going to put yourself at greater risk for spinal injuries. Mm-hmm. And those are the worst injuries you could have as far as I'm concerned. I have been lucky in the sense that, I hurt my back when I was 16 from just doing too many swings during baseball practice on my own. One off season, it was kind of a lower lumbar injury, rubbing icy hot on it all day during class and stuff like that. Fortunately, 6 weeks later, it went away and it never came back. Awesome, right? But the one thing that you don't want is anytime you're in the gym, especially when you're dealing with heavyweight, but even if you're not dealing with heavyweight, every time you're in the gym, you can be doing the last repetition of a particular lift without pain in your entire life. Maybe if you don't execute it properly. And so, once you turn 30, you become aware of your mortality, which maybe makes it impossible to compete at an elite level. But at the same time, you're aware of your mortality, and it's up to you to make decisions based off of it.
Powerful. Yeah. So a little bit about my journey of finding mobility, really. So started lifting weights at 16, the year was 2010. Throughout high school track, I never really did mobility. Looking back, I'm like, man, I could have been so much better. Didn't do any extra mobility. I was a hurdler. Hip mobility would have been fantastic. And then after high school, continued to train until I met Zach Hummel and moved to Indianapolis in 2016, 2017. And that was when I really started to train at a high level. So between 2017 to 2020, we really ramped things up. Like, Zach, dude, like we were getting after it. We were training hard. We're training strongman. We're training powerlifting. Like we're training 2 hours a day, pushing, grinding, right? And not eating so great either, like eating just shitty food, Five Guys after our training sessions, Chipotle after each training session, full of seed oils. But I was young and I was able to get away with it, like mid-20s still at that point. And so despite how hard we were training and the amount of weight that we were moving, I was deadlifting 500 plus pounds, on a weekly basis, front squat and big weight.
You were deadlifting 500 on a weekly basis?
It was mostly like mid 400s, but close to 500 was kind of where my working sets are, similar to where you're at right now, at 455 range, 475 range for, 3-4 rep range. But nevertheless, though, it was a lot of weight on the body. You know what I mean? But I still never really had to focus on mobility. I wasn't forced to, right? As humans, we learn through pain, most people. Yeah. And so as I've mentioned on the show, I believe in March of 2020, all of my lifting aspirations and dreams were shattered in a split second as my knee exploded and I looked down and my kneecap's on the side of my leg and I violently shoved my kneecap back into my leg, totally ruining the cartilage underneath of my kneecap, right? So from that point forward, I had to get surgery, of course, and it, I was out of training pretty much that whole year. But as I started to come back into training in 2021 and started to approach triathlon training, more endurance training, I realized really quickly that I had no option but to start to focus more on my mobility. So it was kind of a gradual process. And then it was really the beginning of this year in 2022, seeing really like how much focus Alex put on his mobility and spending some more time with Alex in person. And Alex came down to Costa Rica with me in February and we spent a whole week together. And it was eye-opening seeing how much time he spent on his mobility. I mean, it was you spend an hour plus a day consistently. You're always doing some sort of mobility. And even at that point, I'm like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Why is he spending so much time doing mobility? But then, as I said, pain is such a great teacher. As my endurance training started to ramp up this year, especially with running and even cycling too, it's also repetitive. And my right leg was where I blew my knee out. And it's still, even up to this point, undersized, underdeveloped. It's not quite there yet in recovery. It's like 80%, I'd say. So as those repetitive motions continued, injuries started to arise, right? Debilitating injuries where my IT band got so bad early in the year that I couldn't run anymore. And I couldn't hardly walk on certain days. And so I had to completely take a step back, quit running, get back with the physical therapist, get back with the chiropractor, the masseuse. And I remember Barbara saying to me, one of my first sessions back after like 6 months, she's like, dude, you got to start stretching more. You got to start doing more mobility on your own outside of just coming to work with me. And that was eye-opening for me. And so from that point forward, I started to dedicate 30, 40 minutes a day, sometimes up to an hour a day of mobility. And I've experimented throughout this year. And I'm now at a point where I've really found my groove with mobility, right? Everyone's different. Alex's mobility routine looks completely different than mine. Our injuries are completely different. Our sports are completely different. But I've found what works for me. And I now do that pretty much every single day, in addition to usually biweekly massages, as Alex and I chatted about, as kind of a luxury, but something that makes a huge difference. Plus, I go to the chiropractor regularly as well, and they have some therapy stuff there and regular adjustments. And the difference is astounding. And the way that my body feels right now, even at peak volume leading into this race, I mean, I'm training so much. I'm training 15 plus hours a week, training hard. My body feels the best it's probably ever felt in regards to just like how my lower back feels, how my hip feels, how my body, everything just feels so open and just feels so spacious and loose. And it's incredible. And I credit a lot of that, of course, focus on nutrition and not eating bullshit, not eating inflammatory foods, but a lot of it's the consistent mobility practices on a daily basis.
Yeah. So, maybe we can learn from Jay. One cheat code that I kind of picked up through my baseball career, through working at Google, is anytime you see somebody that is smart doing something that you think is very weird, focus on that, right? Because that the person's telling you something with his actions where that the person's like thought through what he's doing. And the fact that it's so distinct from the approach that you would take probably means that you haven't thought through your approach as thoroughly as the person doing the weird thing. So just talk to them about it, learn about it, be open-minded to it. And if it makes sense, you can incorporate that in your own life, whether it's mobility or anything else. Oftentimes the first movers, the first people who are able to solve problems in ways that other people can't, do it unconventionally. They do it by doing certain things that are thought to be wrong by most people. That's why most people don't do it. But the innovative people simply have a different order of prioritization for why certain things matter. So they focus on things that other people don't consider important and are able to get away with not focusing on things that other people consider to be essential. And they still win. And that's how paradigms shift. And that's how mindsets change. That's how points of view grow. Keep your mind open. You'll notice a lot.
I think for me early on, it was just laziness. You know what I mean? I just didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to spend the time because I've been around it even prior to you, but I just never was forced to with no pain. Yeah. And then it was a laziness thing. And now I've fallen in love with it. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's like I kind of look forward to my mobility. It's almost a stress relieving practice for me where I can just breathe, stretch, and just like, I don't know, it's something I actually enjoy now. But in regards to some resources for mobility for people, obviously you just mentioned you have your ebook, right? What's that called?
Mobility Mastery on Gumroad. Promoted
Mobility Mastery. That covers like full body, like that's full body.
Yeah, there's lower body stretching. So, one thing that I have going for me is I have really, really good mobility in my lower body. I mean, Jay, you saw in Costa Rica, like I'm nose to knee doing hamstring stretches, full palm of the foot, right? And perhaps that's one reason why my lower back has stayed relatively healthy throughout my 20s and 30s. And so it has lower body training, a little bit of lower body hip mobility, predominantly shoulder mobility work. When you think about how the body breaks down, it's typically shoulders, hips, knees, and lower back. And, obviously you can have acute injuries that limit your wrist mobility, ankle mobility. Like there's a lot of things that can be broken. But if you look at where the wear and tear usually shows with people, it's in the areas that I mentioned. And so, the thing about the human body and life in general is that things that go well tend to continue going well, and things that go poorly tend to continue going poorly. And so just like investing in, say, Bitcoin in 2015 would have been a lot more advantageous than investing in Bitcoin in 2018, which would have been a lot more advantageous than investing in Bitcoin in 2021. And so when anything is going bad, you want to immediately address the things that could make it spiral downward to avoid a cataclysmic drop in output. And so that is why I put the focus that I put on mobility. Again, not because of my shoulder specifically. My shoulder doesn't really give me that much pain anymore. It's because of the compensation that I'm worried about. That's the thing that I got to stop from happening, because I can deal with a bad shoulder. I know how to deal with that. I've had a bad shoulder the last 4 years. I've been 4% body fat, shredded with a bad shoulder. Fine. But I don't know how to deal with a bad back. And so that's why I want to keep my shoulder healthy, so I can keep my back healthy.
It's been my experience too, is my knee's totally fine, right? Like I'll feel it here and there, but it's my hip, it's my IT band, it's my glute. Everything else is a result of the initial injury. And I love what you said there. My Ironman coach said this to me at the beginning of the year when I was having IT band issues. It's not going to just resolve itself, right? You can hope and wish. It's not going to resolve itself. And as you said, it's likely going to now turn into symptoms 2, 3, 4 and beyond. It's going to continue to cause a string of issues. And so if you're someone that has issues now, like approach it head on, get Alex's mobility book, start checking out resources. There's a great resource on YouTube. His name's Smashworks. I don't know if you've ever seen Smashworks before, Alex. It's one of my favorites. Zach and I both love this guy. It's Smash, WERX.
Yeah. He's from my area in California. I didn't realize that when Zach took me into him, but yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's absolutely phenomenal. And also for all the young people out there, even if you're older and you don't have any issues right now, like start to take 10, 15 minutes a day to apply to your mobility. You're going to get better performance. That's another thing that I didn't mention. Not only do I feel healthier and have less aches and pains, but my performance has increased as a result of my mobility, right? I'm able to swim more efficiently. I'm able to bike more efficiently. So now I'm able to perform at a higher level. But I think it's good for people out there to learn from our mistakes, because you usually learn through pain, but you can learn through other people's pain too.
Yeah, and the fact that you're able to perform better kind of aligns with the simplification process that I've applied to my worldview, which our buddy Zach says is the best at finding shortcuts for anybody he knows. We know this, with the way I approach dieting, the way I approach training, all this. I try to figure out like what are the 2 or 3 things that move the needle the most, so I don't have to worry about things 3 through 10. What you want to do if you approach life with that mindset is you want to work against yourself as little as possible, right? Because anytime you're doing something, your actions can advance you towards your goals or they can restrain you from reaching your goals. So a good example is food, right? If people want to lose fat, likely that's going to result in eating less food. Not always, but likely. Well, you want to eat food that makes you less hungry, right? What's the best way to eat more food? Is to eat food that makes you hungrier. You're both injecting energy into your body that leads you to consuming more energy. Okay, that is the absolute worst thing you can consume if you want to consume less. If you do want to consume less, the right thing to do is consume highly satiating food that fills you up so that after you eat it, you are less hungry, right? Well, the same thing is true with biomechanical movements. You can move a lot faster if you're not getting in your own way. You can succeed in life a lot easier if you're not getting in your own way. And so doing mobility work sufficiently puts you in a much better position to not get in your own way so that you can perform at your highest possible potential.
I was going to say, I would argue as well, if you do consistent mobility work, you will over the next 10 years also make more money. You'll have better relationships because I mean, our body is everything. And if your body isn't feeling 100%, if energy is not able to flow efficiently through your body, it's going to throw off every other aspect of your life. So to piggyback on what you said, I believe it will impact not only your training, but every single aspect of your life if you focus on your recovery more.
Yeah. And to, what Jay just says, may sound a little woo-woo to a lot of people, but I'll give you a specific example for why that may be true, right? Your body needs oxygen to recover. Try not breathing oxygen for 10 minutes, see how you feel, right? Your body doesn't just need like a little bit of oxygen. It needs the oxygen that you're consuming. So go to altitude for, 12 hours, see how you feel, right? You're not going to feel as good. And so if you have mobility issues, you're probably going to have circulation issues, right? So if you have circulation issues, how are the nutrients going to get delivered to the areas of your body that they need to get delivered to in order to repair the cells? And so when you think about training and recovery, every time you train, you break many things down in your body. You don't just break down the thing that you're directly training. You break down a lot of things. And the way your body breaks down is if one of the several things you're breaking down or more, say you break down 20 things, you probably break down more than 20 things, but say you break down 20 things doing intense squats. Well, it just takes one of those 20 things to be insufficiently recovered the next time you throw a lot of weight on your back to where that one thing is going to start to become a problem because you're breaking it down, but you're only building it back to 80%. And then you're going to break it down again, and you're only going to build it back to 80%. So all of a sudden, after 2 sessions, you're only at 64% recovery. After 3 sessions, you're at 52.2% recovery, whatever, my math is off. And so you'll continually degrade your state if your body is structured in a way where you're not efficiently delivering nutrients everywhere, right? If you're not efficiently breathing. If your skeletal structure changes, it's going to change the way you breathe, right? So if your skeletal structure changes, the oxygen that you're consuming is very likely going to be at least somewhat compromised, as well as the nutrients that are being delivered to all places of your body are likely to be delivered less efficiently. So you are not going to recover as well as the person who doesn't have those issues.
Bingo.
Yeah.
I feel happy about this conversation with recovery. I don't have much more to, obviously we could dive into a bunch of different topics within recovery more. Something I am actually interested in you talking about real quick is stem cells, because I know it's something that we've chatted about. We've both considered. Yeah. What do you think about stem cells for recovery and specifically like for your injury?
Something I'm looking into, right? And so I invest in my body like, it's an asset, right? It's just like a business. If you own a building and you make money off the building, you got to take care of the building. This is my building. I got to make money off of it. So you got to take care of it. And so that means like I'm definitely willing to spend thousands of dollars on keeping my body intact if I think it's a smart thing to do. So, I've set aside funds to get stem cell. The thought process is I want to see how well I can recover without it, because likely what I want to consider is pairing arthroscopic surgery with stem cell to get some of the spurring out of my shoulder, and then to see if we can regenerate some cartilage in there. I'm not done with gaining my mobility without surgery. And so I want to see where that takes me first. And then, once I hit a 3-month patch where I'm just kind of like stagnating, not really making any progress. And it's like, all right, do we still want to do the arthroscopic surgery? Yes or no? If we want to do the arthroscopic surgery, do we want to do the stem cell after it? Almost certainly. The extent of the research I've done on it hasn't been that great, to be honest. I have a friend who's a major league pitcher who did stem cell. And I know Ronnie Coleman. He's had multiple back surgeries. His body is just destroyed. It looks like a train hit him. But he's been doing stem cell fairly consistently for the last couple of years. And he's even said that he's had pain-free days, right? And so it's like, wow. If that guy's body can regenerate from its state where he has like a dozen screws in his spine to where now he can lift weights and he weighs like 260 pounds of like muscle. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, there must be something there, and I'm going to explore it further.
There's levels of stem cells too, right? It's not just like generally just stem cells, right? Like there's a lot of different types of stem cells, like who's administering it. So there's a lot of variation and variables within getting stem cells done too.
Yeah. Well, I think the main difference is, do the stem cells come from you or do they come from somebody else? And one type is legal in the US, the other type isn't. And so that's why you see a lot of high-end athletes going outside the US is there a lot of like solid research done on showing how much more beneficial the stem cells from like? I'm not sure. My conspiracy theorist boss, who I think he was considering investing in a stem cell clinic. He's a big believer in the stem cells that are not legal in the US. When he does his stem cell therapy, it's in Switzerland.
Who is that?
It's my boss, my conspiracy theorist boss.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, let me know once you get stem cells done, because I'm going to let you go first, and then I'll follow.
I'm the guinea pig. Yeah, I'm the guinea pig for all this. Give me probably not anywhere before 18 months from now, but who knows? Maybe.
Cool.
All right. Good wrap. Good episode 3, Jay.
This was fun as always. Love you guys.